Okay, that intro was totally ridiculous, but we're here finally with the third development video for Cantata. I'm Kyle Cookstell, the lead designer and developer on the game, and I'm so excited to finally be giving you the third dev video for Cantata. That intro felt sort of necessary because so much stuff has changed in the game. Even just looking at it right now, if you've watched previous development videos, this is the main menu. The main menu looks totally different. So many things have changed. I'm so excited to spend the time in this video to basically walk through all of that stuff. I'm also using YouTube's new feature for chapter markers. So if you want to sort of jump around and look at different parts of the devlog in different orders, you can scrub the little timeline at the bottom and you'll sort of see the different sections and, preview what's going to be up next. I'm going to start with just some stuff in the main menu just to sort of walk around. So in the old version of the game, a lot of this menu was sort of split out and kind of inconsistent, but now there's this unified menu up here. I'm channeling a lot of the stuff like what you might have seen if you've ever played like StarCraft 2 or something like Heroes of the Storm. So right here I can click between playing some of the campaign, which you can see is still in development. Sorry, none of that in this video. I can play the tutorial, which is totally new. We'll talk about that later. I can see what skirmish maps I have on in my game that I can play. There's a modding section here which allow you to edit maps as well as create a new map. There's options that will be in here, and then there's an exit button and you can actually exit the game now. Before you had to do Alt F4 and that's terrible. So this is the main menu. I'm gonna go ahead and jump into a skirmish map because that'll really start to show you a lot of what's different in this version of the game. So I'm just gonna open up this alpha demo map that you may have seen in other games, and we'll go from there. So once we're in the game here, hopefully you can tell that things already look like much cleaner. The UI is sort of not as janky looking. It looks kind of clean here. All this top stuff looks way more consolidated. Even as I'm mousing over terrain here now, you can sort of see that the tooltips are a little bit cleaner. And we'll go into some of that. But just from the start, I'm going to pull up some older UI screenshots here so that you can take a look. Even just comparing these two things together, you can already see how what we're looking at now is sort of much cleaner, and what we're looking at before is it's much more like busy, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't mean anything. All the functionality is still here. It's just sort of it's put in different places to hopefully be more readable. I'll do a little walkthrough of the UI and we can talk about what each thing means. So just to start, I can close this window, and you can already see here some of the interesting stuff that's changed in this version of the game. As I mouse over this, it says close this window, so I'll close that. When I'm mousing around, I can see information about the terrain that I'm on. The far left number with the little weight on it is basically the capacity of the terrain. The movement little arrow, the blue thing, means that this terrain costs 1 to move through, and the yellow eye icon means that this terrain has 1 vision cost. Different things in the game have different vision costs and different movement costs. So if I move over here, for example, I can see that the trees cost more to move through, and they're also harder to see through and have a lower capacity. The mountain has a very low capacity and also a very high movement and vision cost. I can talk about the weight system later, and you can also check out the link to the Cantata documentation in the description below, and from there you can check out a lot of the other sort of systems in the game. But I don't want to spend too much time on that because we got a lot of stuff to get through. So you can already see here as I'm moving, I'm also not pressing anything. So before, a lot of the things in the game were driven by key presses. What I've done as part of this game is to basically make everything now driven by mouse clicking. So right now when I mouse over anything, it will just appear. I don't have to hold some hotkey or anything to make that happen. That's true for basically everything you see on screen right now. So there's now this concept of objectives. So when I mouse over this objective, I can see that, oh, I need to go travel to the other side of the map. I can also mouse over my commanding officer. I can mouse over what level I am. I can mouse over this. So this is a big part of the game, which is action points. So action points in AP dictate how many actions you can do on your turn before you have to go to someone else's turn. In the final game, the more kind of stuff you do, the more your commanding officer will level up, which will then give you the ability to have more AP. But to start, I'm just giving any player 10 AP. I'm going to skip this blue thing for now. I'm going to go over here so I can see that this is player 1. This is who I am. I'm currently taking my turn. I can see that in turn order, this player 2, the AI will go next, and then player 3, the environment, they'll go third. After each of us goes, then it'll come back to my turn and we'll start again. And so the next thing I want to talk about is the infrastructure menu. So before, in the old version of the game, there was a little window over here to the left. I'll pull up another screenshot here so you can see. On the left side, the idea was that you had the ability to build infrastructure, and infrastructure are things that you can basically build on the map using some number of supply. I hid that behind an actual little menu here, which if you mouse over, it'll tell you what you can do and also give you a description of what infrastructure does. I'm really pulling a lot of my tooltip ideas from games like Total War, as well as some of the Paradox games like Stellaris and Imperator Rome, that kind of give you more information inside of a tooltip than just like the basics. So when I see here, when I'm mousing over the build infrastructure menu, I can see that I have the ability to click it, but it also tells me what infrastructure is. This tooltip, for example, says that infrastructure is placed directly on the map and usually costs some amount of global supply and or AP. So if I click this button, I'll open up this little menu here, which shows me what infrastructure I can build. When I'm mousing over it here, I'm also getting more tooltips. So a lot of the feedback from the older versions of the game was that it was really hard to understand what anything is doing or what it does. And I'm kind of channeling what a lot of strategy games have chosen to do recently to fix that, which is to basically make everything have a tooltip. If you want to know what something is, you mouse over it and you can find out. So here I can mouse over infrastructure items I can build. So I can see that if I mouse over here, I can say I have the drone factory, which costs 3 AP and 10 global supply. It gives me a little description of what the drone factory can do. So this one says that it produces basic drones and basic supply lines. It also tells me what other interactables it can build. Interactables in Cantata are basically anything that's on the map, including infrastructure. I can also build 2 supply lines. This has the ability to build 2 steel supply lines. And they'll also tell me like how to interact with this. So this says click the infrastructure to build and then click on a valid spot on the map to build on. So I'm going to go ahead and build this drone factory here. So if I click it, we'll see another new thing that's been added into this version of the game. So in previous versions of the game, you had the ability to basically build supply or build a infrastructure anywhere on the map. And the whole point of that was that you wanted the player to be able to feel like they had the ability to build stuff on the map kind of wherever they wanted to. The issue, though, was that infrastructure specifically, because it needs to be connected to supply to operate, and at the time, supply fell off at a distance, it'd be possible for me to build infrastructure like way over here, but the supply line that could potentially give me that number of supply wasn't able to be connected because there'd be 0 supply available at that tile. I've done a few things to change that, which I'll talk about later, but the biggest thing to note now is that when I click something to build, I can see little icons that basically show me where it's able to accept supply of types that it can use and where they'll come from. So I can see by mousing over any of these tiles that I'm able to get this component supply coming from this machine base, and says that, okay, if I build my drone factory here, I can even see in my tooltip that there's components that are available. When I build it, it's going to cost 10 global supply and cost me 3 AP. I'm going to cancel that though with right click and then come to just another building like the plant. And I can see here that has a similar thing. It requires components. And if I click this hanger and place it down, I don't see any supply lines that are connecting to any of the spots that I'm trying to mouse over. That's because right now in the game, I haven't actually built anything that's able to give the hanger the types of supply it needs to build stuff. So I'm going to build that machine base first, and we'll come back to building a hanger. So when I come back to build this drone factory, I'm going to mouse over one of these tiles where it gives me a little preview that I can accept supply of that type there. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. When I click that, you're going to see 2 things happen. The first is in this top left section up here where there's action points. My action points are going to go down because I'm using 3 AP to build something. And this number is going to go down. So in Cantata, the whole idea is that you have this large number of global supply. And when I look at this global supply number, this gives me kind of a more in-depth breakdown of what this number means. All I need to know right now is that when I place this, that number is going to go down by 10. So if you watch both of those when I click, you'll see it go down. I also just set off a trigger where Vashti's telling me about where I want to reunite with my units, but I'll just close that window. So now that I've got this building built, I can mouse over it and see some other stuff about it. I can see that it's owned by me. I can see how much health it has, which are those little green tick marks. I can see that it weighs 1. I can see that if I click it, I'll select it. And I can also see that there's 0 out of 4 queued supply projects. I can also still get the terrain information below it. Right now I can see that the drone factory is sitting on scorched earth terrain, and right now the terrain itself has a capacity of 9 out of its maximum 10. That's because the weight of the drone factory is a 1, which means that the total capacity of the scorched earth terrain is only 9 now. I can also see that the terrain itself still has a movement and vision cost of 1 and 1, which means that my drone factory isn't like altering the movement or vision cost, at least right now. So what I'm going to do next is open up this drone factory and show you one of like the biggest things that I've done in Cantata. And it's sort of like, it's also worth thinking about that a lot of the changes that I've done in this build weren't just like, oh, this would be really cool to do. It's a lot of stuff that has to do with sort of different parts of the game needing to be changed for very specific reasons. And then all of those changes sort of cascading into much bigger stuff. And I'll show you some of what that means when I open up the drone factory. So when I click this here, I can get a little information about the drone factory. Still working on the portraits, which I can even see here in my tooltip, portrait coming soon. I can mouse over its specific characteristics. I can mouse over the characteristics of the terrain, and so on and so forth. So when I click build here, what I'm going to see is that I have the option to build some number of things with this selected drone factory. Each interactable that you might build on the map has access to build different stuff, and what they can build is basically dictated by their faction or the unit or whatever else. Again, it's sort of like a StarCraft model where, you know, certain buildings in StarCraft can only build certain units. It's not like you have one building that can build everything, which is maybe more like what you would expect from like a Paradox type game. In Cantata, there's different build options depending on the building that you have selected. So with this drone factory, perhaps unsurprisingly, I have the ability to build a drone. When I mouse over the drone, I can see its build cost as well as this thing I'm calling an execute cost. There's also a small description of it, as well as some actual info about what the drone can do. So right now I can see that if I build a drone, the drone has a 6 movement ability. It can attack for 3, and it has a vision range of 9. I'm also getting some more information here about what to do, where it says click to add a drone to the build queue. So hold the phone, that's a big thing. In the old version of Cantata, and I'm going to bring up a old screenshot or video of me playing the old version here, there was no such thing as build queues. Any specific unit that you chose to build or supply line you chose to build on a building was the thing that that interactable would be building. In Cantata now, there are build queues. So units can have configurable number of like build slots. It's not infinite. The drone factory, for example, just has 4 open slots, which I can see by scrolling up and down this list, or I can look here with these 4 little open build slots here. If I click the drone, what it's going to do is going to add it to the build queue, which I can see right here. And what I can see already is that this basic drone unit, if I mouse over it, it's going to give me the status. It's going to say, right now this basic drone has no components income. So what I want to do is actually give this drone factory access to components. What I can do then is if I click this machine base and go to its build tab, I can see here that it also has a build queue of size 4, and then it has the ability to build these component supply lines. When I click to build a component supply line, I can now see that I can click this to actually build the line. Because the level 1 version of these component supply line doesn't have any sort of actual build cost, which I can see in the tooltip, when I add it to the queue, it's basically finished instantly. So when I click this component supply line here to build, it's going to give me basically a preview of where I could connect this supply line to. So this is also different from the old version of the game, where when you were to build something, you basically had to figure out what was able to be connected to with that line. What the game does now is that basically there's a fixed number of things you'll ever be able to be connected to. So I pre-draw the lines to the buildings that you might be able to connect to. What this does is it makes it easier where, you know, if you've got other things that are down on the map, you don't want to have to go mouse over each individual thing to see if it's able to be connected to. what you can just do is I can see, oh, well, I can connect it to this thing here. So if I mouse over to this drone factory, I can see that by connecting it, it's going to make my drone factory components income increase to 1 from what it's at right now, which is 0. So when I click that, we're going to hear that nice chunky connected sound. And I can see here now that this line is connected between my machine base and my drone factory. I can see this little, components thing animating along the line, which is super cute. And if I open up my drone factory now and go to this connections tab, I can see that I'm now connected to this machine base, and it's giving me +1 to my components income for a total of 1. If I go to my build tab now, I can see that this basic drone is now going to finish in 2 turns. So what happened there? Like why now is it going to finish in 2 turns? So now what I'm going to do is take you into talking about supply management on a given item in a build queue. So the best part about this new version of the game, which I think is true, is that in the older versions of the game, you had to manually allocate any supply that you wanted to use to build something. In Cantata now, when something receives supply, that supply is automatically allocated to anything in the build queue that can actually use that type of supply. So if I open up my basic drone here, I can see that it actually has this components requirement of 2, and because I'm getting 1, it's already allocated that supply here. What I can see is that with that 1 income, it's going to take me 2 turns to complete this components requirement. And because this basic drone only has a components requirement of 2, in 2 turns, the whole thing will complete. Other things have different requirements that will then make them take longer, and we can get into that into a second. If you wanted to in the game, right now by default, when things are added to their build queue, they're automatically managed, which I can see at the top when I mouse over this project management icon. It tells me that automatic projects have their requirements automatically managed based on their priority in the build queue, with higher priority projects being allocated before lower priority ones. What that means is that if I add in maybe like a steel supply line here and open up its requirements, I can see that it also requires components. But because I'm only getting 1 component supply type in, I don't actually have the ability to add more components to its requirement. I basically only got, 1 component's income that I'm splitting between these 2 items in my build queue. Because these are automatically managed though, if I wanted this steel supply line to have supply allocated to it, I could actually move it up in the priority in the build queue. And now I can see that its supply was allocated here, whereas this basic drone now doesn't have any supply staged for it. What I could do though is I could also take them off of automatic management and then just manually micromanage the supply myself. So I could come to this steel supply line, put this on manual, come to the basic drone and put it on manual. I could come to this steel supply line here, click this button to deallocate it, come to this basic drone and now allocate that supply there. So now even though this basic drone is the second item in the build queue in terms of priority, it's the one that's got the supply allocated. I could also put it back on auto, and because there's no supply allocated here, it's automatically allocating. If I put them both back on auto, it's going to allocate according to the priority, so now the steel supply line gets precedent. But if I move the basic drone back to the top, the basic drone will now build in 2 turns. That's pretty complicated to manually manage all of your supply lines, but it's there. If you want to do that, and I think that, high level Cantata play, whatever that means, that'll be a thing that you can do. However, you don't have to worry about that if you don't want to. You can just add stuff to your build queue, and then sort of like magic, the supply will just be allocated as it comes in. Right now, if I want to build more than 2 things at a time, what I can also do is if I come back to this machine base here and go to the build tab, I can see that I'm connected to this drone factory, but also I can actually work on upgrading its strength of its supply line. That way I can actually give more supply to that connected drone factory. So I'm going to click this, and I can see that that upgrade is now just added to the build queue like anything else. So if I wanted to add, a component supply line or something, I could also add it to the queue. When I open up this component supply line, there's this new thing that we're going to see now. So one of the big changes in this version of Cantata as well is that there's different types of requirements. Basically anything that can go into your build queue, which I would call a supply project, those things can have sort of any number of requirements. So these lines happen to use turns. These lines happen to use components. Other things might use turns and components, or might use processors or whatever else. So the idea is that anybody that's like making their own building or unit, the things that they build can like be configured. It's not like, oh, everything requires components, or everything requires processors, or everything requires something else. You know, thinking back to the StarCraft analogy, it's not like everything only requires minerals or Vespene gas or something. In Cantata, things can basically require either the types of supply that a faction has access to. It can require turns. There's other things we're working on that I don't want to tell you about that it can require. But so that was a big thing. So the ability to basically have something like turns as the core way to build something was like big mind expander, mind changer for working inside of the game. So one of the other core reasons that we really wanted to work on this sort of notion of requirements is specifically with this issue I was talking about before of in the old game, when you were to connect supply to something, that supply would fall off at a distance. So if I wanted to build like this drone factory, you know, a little bit further away from the base than I might want to, it would be able to be connected to a supply line, but the supply that I'd be getting from the thing it was connected to would actually be much more decreased versus just building it really close to like the thing that's giving it supply. So that's like well and good, but in watching people play, everyone would just build really close, and then they would just move their units, you know, forward on the map one turn. And so it was better to basically build all of your infrastructure as close as possible and then just move your units an extra turn. So knowing that, I was like, well, you know, the other part about that is in the old game, and I'll bring up some screenshots of that now, you know, when you were connecting to stuff, you would get supply amounts that were like really high. So something might get like 16 supply or like 17 supply. And what that meant was that as a player, you were sort of focused on having to think about what's the difference from my perspective of, you know, giving something 13 supply or giving something 14 supply. And with the thing, after like thinking about that, I was like, you know, that doesn't actually matter. You don't care about the actual number of supply something is getting. What you care about is how many turns it's going to take you to finish what you're building with that amount of supply. So what I did, it was basically like a few things. One was that I just like boiled all the numbers down. So I can see here by connecting to my machine base, I'm only getting one component supply. In the old version of the game, that'd be like no supply. But what I've done is I've also made the requirements to build stuff all very low now. So if you're getting 2 supply versus 1 supply, that feels like a meaningful thing that you can account for and understand and sort of reason about as a player. And so what I'm building here towards is this idea that if I'm to build this, and I'm to build this, because each of these are now giving this 1 supply, and I open up this Walker's management panel, I can start to like have a better sense of how taking other actions in the game will affect how quickly this machine hangar has the ability to produce walkers. So for example, if I come to this processor plant here and I go to this line that's connected, I can see here that by upgrading this line, I'm going to increase the output of the supply line that's connected to the machine hangar by 1, which would mean that this machine hangar will be able to get 2 processors to be allocated per turn. However, I can also see that there's a build cost of 4 components. What I can do now is say like, well, you know, is it worth me spending 4 components to be able to upgrade this line, which I know that if I come to this machine hangar and open up this Walker tab, I can see that if I got 2 processors in, this 3 number here would tell me that basically at that rate, I'd be able to finish this Walker's processors requirement in 3 turns. So probably right, I should upgrade this line. So while this Walker builds, I'm going to focus on another big change in the game that drove a lot of like UI refactoring and a lot of big changes. So when I click this machine base and I click build and I click this supply line here and I click build somewhere, what I can see is that there's these two like outlines that appear around it. One of them is a sort of thick purple line, and outside of that is this more skinny purple line. You know, before, if I had a building that was inside of this range, it would pre-draw one of those yellow lines to that building. So if I actually just build this drone factory here, for example, and I go back to this component supply line on this machine base, I could see that, okay, well, I could connect to this thing. But what happens if I want to, you know, imagine I build a drone factory, but I want to build it here. Because it's like, well, I want to build drones, but I don't want to have to build a drone and like walk it, you know, all the way up the map. What if I want to build a drone here? Well, that's already an issue now, I can see, because there's a machine gun that's going to attack me. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know, move some of my units up a little bit closer. Sorry about the lag as well. You know, recording a 1080p video as well as doing voiceover as well as running a game all at the same time is making me see that I need to upgrade my computer at some point. But anyways, if I go to this machine base and go back to this component supply line, what I can see is that while I can connect to this drone factory, I can't connect to this one. So an issue there, right, is that, well, the drone factory, to build anything in here, needs components. So how am I supposed to get components to this drone factory? And so here was one of the basically large driving decisions that drove me to change a lot of the UI. So if I actually go to build this component supply line, when I mouse over this threshold, watch what happens. So a lot of sort of, you know, messiness and noisiness in the UI, which we're going to work on. We're going to make it so it's not so crazy. But if you just focus on the tooltip right now. So what the tooltip says is that you can build a repeater. What a repeater does, it takes in an input supply type and produces two new lines of that same type. So if you've played something like Minecraft before, you know, you might know about redstone or whatever. And what that has the ability to do is it accepts something and, you know, repeats it across a far distance. So what repeaters allow me to do is actually spread where I can get components from at any point on the map. So instead of having to rely on, you know, building really close to my base, I can actually build stuff a little bit further out. This building's actually going to get trashed by this machine gunner, unfortunately. And that unit might not survive. But what I can do is I can go ahead and build a repeater. So if I click this machine base and click in here to click this component supply line, when I mouse over here, I can see a few things. So from where it's at, I can see that, okay, yes, my machine base will connect to it, but also look at that line that's being drawn between it and that drone factory that's about to be taken out by that machine gun. What it's showing me is that repeater inside that range, its little purple range, has the ability to then give components to something else. If I zoom out, it might be a little more visible, but basically there's that little purple range that you can see outside the range of where my repeater is at, and that's its supplyable range. So if I'm to place it somewhere like here where this, you know, drone factory is inside of its supplyable range, and then I click to select it, I can see that it has the ability to build component supply lines. I can also see that there's now a line that's connecting this machine base to this repeater, even though right now it's sort of hard to see in part because it's passing right through this processor plant. So what I'll do is, just for, you know, demonstrations purposes, I'm going to start building this component supply line, which I can see here is going to take 2 turns. So this is also sort of a differentiating factor. For this machine base, if I wanted to build a component supply line, it built instantly. For a repeater, when I want to build something, it has the ability to build component supply lines, but what it takes to build those component supply lines is actually different than the requirement that the machine base has. What this does is that it means that you actually have to be connected to something for a repeater to function. I'm also going to spend a little bit of time now trying to build up some units so I can go attack some of these things that are about to take me out. And to also see if my units have attacked or not each turn, I can hold Alt, which will give me a nice little preview of, you know, well, I can see this drone here is moved, but they haven't attacked yet. Same for this one. I can also see the status of supply projects. So I can see that these things are all working on something. And if I mouse over them, I can see, for example, that this drone factory is working on this basic drone. There's 1 turn left. This walker is being worked on. and it's got 5 turns left. This is making another processor's line, and that's got 1 turn left. So I'm gonna go ahead and change my turn. I can see I got little notifications up here to tell me what happened. So I can see that my basic drone took 5 damage and then was eventually destroyed. I can also see that these processors were completed as well as this basic drone. If I click this, it'll take me to the project. And here I can see already this notion of execute costs. So before we moused over something over here, we saw that it had a build cost, which we've talked about. But there's also now this idea of execute costs. So in addition to having the cost to build something, to actually put something on the map has some cost associated with it. So if I want to build this basic drone, for example, and I do, when I mouse over somewhere on the map where it can build, if you check out my AP in the top left, you can see that it's telling me that it's going to cost 2 AP to build. I can also see in this tooltip that building this will cost 2 AP. So once I build that, I can then move this drone. I can also see here that moving is going to cost me 1 AP. That drone was taken out, which was, good and bad because I can't attack this, but also it gave me another turn for this drone factory to be supplied. But unfortunately, there's no supply line in range, so this drone factory is going to go out next turn. I'm going to go ahead and build another supply line to connect it to this drone factory, queue up some more drones. And then this guy's still got a walker, going to build in 4 turns, so I'm going to upgrade the supply lines that are connected to it. So that building was unfortunately destroyed. I can take these units and keep moving them closer. Another interesting thing that I've added to the game is when you're checking out your movement range, you can actually see sort of a little indicator to show you if you're in range of an enemy that can attack you. And will also show you via the tiles that you're mousing over, kind of like a difference between the tiles that you can move to and the tiles that that unit's able to attack you on. So you can see that little red outline tiles. So I know that any of these 4 positions I can move to here, though they're closer to the enemy, they're going to make me prone to be able to be attacked. So I'm going to move right to the left here where I know I'm in the clear. So mousing over these 2 units here, I can see that I'm still out of their range. This one's just got this 1 tile that's in range here, so I'm going to move a little bit right behind it. From this alt view as well, I have the ability to execute projects. So if I mouse over this basic drone here and I click that, I can just quickly execute that project, which is really nice. That way you don't have to, open up this drone factory, click the build tab, click the thing to build it, and so on. So I'm starting to form up a small little army here of drones, which is great. I'm going to upgrade all my lines. This repeater's now hanging out up here, but what I can do is once I take out one of these units, I can build a new drone factory a little bit closer. That way I don't have to just keep building them in the back of my base and moving them forward. So if I want to move close, let's see. I'm going to move this drone close and just sort of hope that this machine gun chooses to focus on this other target. But I'll go ahead and move this other drone here and take a hit. When I mouse over here, I can see that this attack will cost some number of AP. And if you look in the top left again, it's blinking to tell me it's going to use AP. I can also see how much damage this is going to do. So from here, it's saying that this attack will do 3 damage, which we can also verify where if we click this unit and mouse over its attack here, it says that the attack strength is 3. So if I click this and then just mouse over this machine gun to attack it, I'll do 3 damage, and then I can see that because I've already attacked this turn and moved, it's now out of actions. This drone is luckily still got a movement left. I'm just going to try to pile on around this machine gun and really hope that, I guess they'll be fine. None of them will die. A drone finished over here. Again, really sorry about that lag. My walker's got 2 turns left, and once that's done, it'll be over. Unfortunately, this components repeater is still sort of hanging out with nothing to do. This one's able to move. Maybe I can move it close. I'll move it like right out of range here. So I've got 3 AP left. I could choose if I wanted to build some other infrastructure. I've also done some other things related to building. So I added hotkeys for toggling that menu. So, you know, if you want to change your, whatever you're building, the number keys change between the option. You can also, you know, disconnect it. I also added the ability to tab through units that still have actions available. So instead of having to click stuff, you can just tab around, which is, you know, doesn't really matter when it's like a small army here, but you know, once you've got a lot more stuff on the map, being able just to quickly tab through anything that has the ability to do an action is really cool. So I think I'm just going to end my turn here and see what happens. So a lot of stuff just upgraded and finished. I can see from this check mark here that this machine hangar is finished building its walker. So I'm going to do that. I can see here that this has got a large AP amount to build. So what I also wanted to talk a little bit about this sort of notion of stuff in your supply queue. So part of the thing that an execute cost is trying to solve is that what you don't want to happen, right, is that like, imagine you've worked away all the way across the map to some like weird little area of the map over here. What you don't want is that you find some secluded building and then you come upon it and then the opposing player had like, you know, 10 turns ago built a lot of defense units inside of its build queue and then is able to take that moment to just drop them all on the map. That's still kind of possible in Cantata, but if you're doing that, because there's an AP cost associated with it, that's like your turn. So imagine if I had, you know, this whole queue full of walkers. There's 4 slots in here and each walker has a 4 AP execute cost. That's 16 AP just to build 4 walkers on the map. That means I could build them all, but I couldn't attack with them because attacking costs AP. I couldn't move them because moving costs AP. I also been able to build any sort of infrastructure. I might not be able to build other supply lines that have execute costs. So when you're doing something like that, the whole idea in Cantata is that you're making a decision against a limited pool of resources. So if that player chooses to want to spam a ton of stuff on the map, you know, they're making that choice and they're not doing that in a way that they can also do, you know, 30 other things. If they're choosing that, it's what they're doing. So even in right now, right, I've only got 10 AP. Spending 4 AP to build this walker might actually mean that I'm not able to move and attack with my other drones over here. So let's see. So if I build this walker here, I can see on these green tiles where it's able to be built. So that, you know, that took 4 AP. If I click this and move it, moving the walker costs 2 AP. So I'm just going to get it inside of range of this machine gunner. So I can see it's in range of the machine gunner and I'll attack it. So if I mouse over here, I can see this walker is going to do a ton of damage and just take out this machine gunner. So it's gone. But now, so just in building my walker, moving it and attacking with it, I have 2 AP left. So that's really great, right? The walker is really strong. You want to use it a lot, but it's not like you have so much range where I can now like, you know, do all the other 15 things I wanted to do in my mind. Attacking with a strong unit feels like attacking with a strong unit because it uses so much of your turn to actually do those actions. Like I said earlier in the development log, as you do stuff in the game, you know, whether it's attacking units or building stuff on the map or exploring new territory, you'll gain experience as your CO, and that will give you more AP. And so the idea is that, you know, as a CO, over time, you're becoming better at managing your army. But what that also means is that, like, you can't just spam, you know, 5 or 6 walkers on the map and assume that it's, you know, GG against some other player. The thing is that you could build all those walkers, but you're not actually going to have enough AP to sort of effectively manage all those walkers really well. So even here, I've got 2 AP left, which basically means that because these drones attack only next to each other, whereas as this walker, as you can tell from the red tiles, can attack sort of around it, I can only basically attack with 1 drone now. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one that's closest, move within range of this machine gunner, and then click to attack it. And I know you're thinking it, and the answer is yes. Repeaters also have the ability to build repeaters. So I'm gonna just increment some turns here. See if this machine gunner can go away and not destroy my other repeaters. Oh, it's resilient. I can use my walker to do it. One more turn, I'll show you. So this repeater here, so if I had, something in range like a drone factory, I can, say, oh, maybe let's put a drone factory here. But then maybe something changes and I'm like, well, actually, I need components, further out on the map. So if I click this repeater and click this components line here, I can see that it also has the ability to build another repeater. And so right now in Cantata, basically any supply line can have a repeater. I could also build a processor as a repeater if I wanted to, but we won't get into that. So yeah, so a lot of big changes. And one of the biggest changes that I'm gonna walk you through a little bit now is what we've done with the tutorial. So when I come back to the main menu here, I can now see that there's a skirmish map, campaigns, but also there's this thing that says tutorial. So if I click and start the tutorial, what I'll get is basically a custom built scenario that walks you through how to do everything in the game. And one of the amazing things about this is that this is also just built in the scenario editor. So because you have the ability to build objectives inside of the scenario editor, and you can attach some of those objectives to actions, you can just build stuff like this inside the context of the game. Some of these, I will admit, are hard-coded, so you can't do everything that I'm doing here with objectives, but you will be able to add objectives and add like regions that, when you enter this, it will clear an objective. It's actually taking some inspiration where if you've seen how like something like Wargroove handles its modding system, there's a similar sort of idea in the objectives and like trigger system in Cantata. But here I can see basically I can just walk through these objectives. So I can see here if I select a unit, it tells me what to do. Left click on your machine base to select it. Selecting a unit allows you to interact with it. Cool, so if I click this, I can see that that objective, marks off. It also is telling me to build a drone factory. So if I come in here and build a drone factory, I can build that, and that's now done. So what this does is it basically, if you're playing this and you're in the early alpha, which if you want to be some of the alpha stuff, join our Discord. The links are in the description. I'm basically sending out people as I make this video, links to this build. So if you want to like click around and test out the tutorial and stuff, this will basically walk you through a lot of the sort of high level concepts in the game. What it won't walk you through is stuff like repeaters, because that's sort of more of an advanced concept. It also doesn't walk you through manually managing supply, because again, kind of like, level 10 Cantata play. But what this will tell you to do is how to select stuff, how to deselect. It'll tell you how to connect a supply line. It'll tell you how to build stuff on the map. So all the things that I was just sort of doing in the previous sections of the development log, this tutorial will just walk you through how to do all of it. I'm really proud of this because this is also another big sort of issue with the game, was that the game gave you like very little guidance on how it wanted to be played. So this tutorial is a way for anyone who's interested in playing the game to be able to basically figure out how to do this. Also, big thanks to all the people who've actually tested this tutorial for me and have like walked through and helped me like debug, issues with the tutorial, as well as find out, gaps in logic or whatever that made it harder to understand. So thank you for, helping me do that. I don't want to walk through the tutorial too much because if you play it, you can figure it out. So I'll just let you, find out what's going on. And so with that is the end of development log number 3 for Cantata. Thank you so much for watching. Please wishlist the game on Steam. That stuff really does help. Tell all your friends. Also, shout out if you're from the 4X Gaming subreddit. You guys have been showing me a lot of love for the game, so I really appreciate people supporting this game. I know making like independent strategy 4X-y type things are like, they're kind of rare. This stuff is hard to make, so I really, really, really appreciate all the love that people are giving this game, and I'm really excited to keep working on it. There's some big news that's happening with the game that I can't talk too much about now, so that's like a small tease. it'll definitely come up in the next development log video. Let me know what you like. I'm working with the community to make this game happen. So if you want to see, more of the developer-y type stuff I showed in the last video, let me know. If you like just me playing the game and digging into systems, say that as well. I can do more of that. If you want to see specific stuff, or you want like specific things, or you have specific questions about the game, I'm also happy to show that stuff off. So again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in development video number 4, hopefully within a month. See you later.